Eviction notice. The words hung in the air between us like a guillotine blade. My mother-in-law's perfectly manicured hand froze mid-gesture, her face transitioning from shock to disbelief to something darker. The Louis Vuitton luggage that had colonized my foyer 3 weeks ago suddenly seemed less like designer statements and more like invasion equipment. You're evicting me? Vivian's voice was dangerously quiet. From my son's home? From my home, I corrected, the property deed clutched in my hand like a shield. And yes, 30 days. How had it come to this? Me, Ellen Morgan, who had built a 20-year career on finding diplomatic solutions to workplace conflicts, standing in my demolished bathroom with contractors frozen mid-demolition, serving legal papers to my husband's mother. Simple. She had left me no choice. Howard, Vivian turned to my husband, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. Are you going to let her do this to your mother? I watched my husband's face as he looked from the credit card statements scattered across the counter to the remains of my grandmother's antique vanity, now in pieces on the bathroom floor. 3 weeks ago, he would have faltered. 3 weeks ago, he would have asked me to be reasonable, to compromise. But that was before he discovered what I'd known all along. This was never about family. It was about control. What choice have you left us? He said quietly. The color drained from Vivian's face as she realized her son, her perfect, obedient son, was taking my side. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the heap of my clothes on the bedroom floor, my grandmother's recipes in the trash, the condescending notes about my elementary cooking skills. I remembered how she'd systematically dismantled my life piece by piece, all while claiming to help. This isn't over, she hissed, her composure cracking. You'll regret this. As I watched her gather her designer purse and storm toward the door, I wondered if she was right. Would I regret this? Would this moment of triumph be worth the family rifts it would cause? But then Howard squeezed my hand, and I knew. Some prices are worth paying for freedom. 2 weeks earlier, darling, where's Howard? Surely he didn't expect his own mother to carry these bags upstairs herself? I stood frozen in my doorway, watching as Vivian Steele's designer luggage claimed more and more territory in my foyer. One bag, then three, then seven. The pit in my stomach grew with each leather thud against my hardwood floors. Each bag seemed more expensive than the last, the monogrammed V's glaring at me like warning signs I was choosing to ignore. He's still at work, I managed, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. I thought you were staying for the weekend. Vivian laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Oh, sweetie, didn't Howard tell you? After finalizing my divorce, I simply can't bear to stay in that empty house. I'll be here until I find my footing again. My chest tightened. But now, show me to the master suite, she interrupted, already climbing our stairs. Her heels clicked against the hardwood like a countdown to disaster. I'd spent hours selecting that flooring, sustainable oak that had cost us a fortune but matched perfectly with the mid-century aesthetic we'd cultivated. Now, watching Vivian's Christian Louboutin stilettos marching across it, I had this sudden, irrational fear that she'd somehow mark it permanently, leaving scars I'd never be able to buff out. The master suite? But that's our, Ellen, dear. She turned, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the banister. I raised Howard in a 7-bedroom Beacon Hill estate. I simply cannot be expected to sleep in a guest room like some visiting cousin. I'm still the queen here. Queen. The word resonated with memories of every imperious pronouncement she'd made over the decade I'd known her. The Queen of Beacon Hill. The Queen of the Boston Symphony Fundraising Committee. The Queen who had deigned to acknowledge her son's marriage to a career woman from the Midwest. I followed her upstairs, words of protest dying in my throat, as she flung open our bedroom door. The bedroom Howard and I had spent months perfecting, from the Egyptian cotton sheets to the custom blackout curtains that helped me sleep after late editorial deadlines. Perfect, she declared, already opening our closet. Howard can move your things to the guest room this evening. My phone buzzed. A text from Howard. Mom told you about staying with us, right? Sorry, crazy day at work. Love you. I gripped my phone so hard I thought it might crack. My first instinct was to call him, to demand he come home immediately and deal with this situation. But I knew how these conversations went. Howard would be caught between us, and somehow, I'd end up feeling unreasonable for objecting to his mother's help. Vivian, we didn't discuss. Oh, look at these hangers. She was already removing my clothes. Wire hangers, Ellen darling. No wonder Howard's suits always look so wrinkled. I'll have my proper hangers delivered tomorrow. My clothes landed in a heap on the floor. Cashmere sweaters I'd saved for months to buy tangled with the Target blouse I'd worn as a junior editor before my career had taken off. I watched my life being unceremoniously dumped on the floor, and something inside me went very still and quiet. It was the same feeling I'd had when I was 12 and found my journal, with all its awkward preteen confessions, being read aloud by the popular girls at school. Violation. Helplessness. And underneath it all, a simmering rage that would take years to fully acknowledge. Amy, I texted my best friend with trembling fingers. Code red. Need wine now. I'll order some new bedding, too, Vivian continued, oblivious to my mounting horror. This, she gestured vaguely at our carefully chosen duvet, is a bit Midwestern, don't you think? The casual dismissal stung more than it should have. 20 years away from Cleveland, and still, my Midwestern taste was apparently something to be corrected, like a child's grammar or a dog's bad habit. Flashback my parents' home. I was 10 when I overheard my father telling my mother she'd have to stretch their teaching salaries even further. Ellen's the smart one, he'd said, not knowing I was listening from the hallway. She could go to college, make something of herself. We need to make sure she has that chance. My mother, already thin from the early stages of the cancer that would eventually take her, had nodded, determination hardening her gentle face. She'll get her chance. No matter what. They'd worked extra jobs, sacrificed vacations, worn the same clothes year after year. Also, I could attend Northwestern. Also, I could build the career they believed I deserved. The career that had eventually led me to Howard, to San Francisco, to this house with its Midwestern decorations. Your mother had remarkable taste, my father told me years later, as we packed up her things after the funeral. She could make a home out of cardboard boxes if she had to. He'd handed me her recipe box, filled with cards written in her neat, precise handwriting. Take this. She'd want you to have it. That recipe box, with its faded floral pattern and notes in my mother's hand, was now sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen Vivian had deemed chaotic and in need of reorganization. Present-day kitchen. The doorbell rang, and I nearly sprinted downstairs. Amy stood there, holding 2 bottles of red wine and wearing her shit's about to go down face. I came as fast as I could, she whispered, following me to the kitchen. What's the emergency? Before I could answer, Vivian's voice floated down. Ellen, be a dear and bring up some hangers from the guest room, and perhaps some tea, Earl Grey, 2 sugars, splash of milk. You remember how I like it, don't you? Amy's eyes widened. Is that? I nodded, uncorking the first bottle with unnecessary force. What is she doing here? Moving in, apparently, I hissed, pouring a generous glass. She's currently redecorating my bedroom because she's still the queen. Oh, hell no. Amy grabbed the second glass. Please tell me Howard didn't agree to this. Howard didn't even tell me until after she arrived. He texted me like it was nothing, like, hey honey, my mother's moving in, taking our bedroom, and apparently I'm sleeping in the guest room now. Love you. Amy's face darkened. She'd been there through every stage of my relationship with Howard, had witnessed firsthand the tightrope I walked with his mother. And you're just going to accept this? Ellen, Vivian called again. That tea coming? I shouted back, my voice honey sweet even as I knocked back half my wine. Amy grabbed my arm. You're not actually going to let her stay, are you? I stared at the ceiling, where I could hear Vivian's heels clicking back and forth. Of course not, I whispered, a plan already forming in my mind. But sometimes you have to play the long game. You have to let the queen think she's won before you can checkmate her. Amy raised an eyebrow. When did you get so strategic? About the time I realized I was married to a man who can't say no to his mother. I poured more wine. Don't worry, I'm not planning anything illegal. Just preparation. For what? The war I didn't know I was in until today. Flashback early days with Howard. The first time I met Howard's mother was at a charity gala in Boston. Howard had warned me, of course. Mom can be intense, he'd said, straightening his bow tie in our hotel room mirror. What an understatement. Vivian Steele was the human equivalent of a perfect storm in Chanel. She'd assessed me with a single glance, taking in my department store dress with the precision of a jeweler spotting a fake diamond. So you're the editor, she'd said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Howard mentioned you work for Lifestyle magazine, was it? Authentic living, I'd replied, trying not to sound defensive. We focus on sustainable design and meaningful experiences rather than consumption. How charming. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Howard's father and I always hoped he'd marry someone from our circle, but I suppose times change. Later that night, Howard had apologized. She's from a different generation, he'd explained. Dad's death hit her hard. She doesn't mean to be. Condescending? I supplied. Protective? He counted, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Howard had always been caught between worlds, raised with privilege, but choosing a less ostentatious path, loving his mother, but chafing under her expectations. I decided then that I could handle Vivian Steele in small doses. Weekend visits. Holiday dinners. Not this. Present-day tea service. I prepared Vivian's tea with mechanical precision, Earl Grey, steeped exactly 4 minutes, 2 sugars, a splash of milk that turned the liquid the exact shade of caramel she preferred. It was the kind of detail you remembered about someone you've been trying to please for a decade. As I carried it upstairs, I saw my clothes still crumpled on the floor, designer labels mixed with Target bargains in an undignified heap. Vivian was on her phone, scrolling through what looked like decorator websites. Your tea, Vivian, I said, setting it beside her on my nightstand, the vintage piece Howard and I had found at a flea market in Sonoma and restored ourselves. She didn't look up from her phone. Thank you, dear. Oh, and we'll need to discuss the kitchen tomorrow. The organization is a bit chaotic. I can help you sort it properly. I smiled, tight-lipped. Of course. Whatever you think is best. As I turned to leave, she added, and Ellen? Howard always preferred a more traditional aesthetic. All this mid-century modern. It's a bit trying. I've ordered a few pieces that will better complement the home's architecture. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and retreated downstairs. Back in the kitchen, Amy was already pouring me another glass. So, what's the plan? I took a long sip, remembering the property papers tucked away in my office desk, the ones that, for tax purposes, listed me as the sole owner of our house, the ones Vivian knew nothing about. The plan, I said quietly, is to let her think she's won for now. Amy clinked her glass against mine. Long live the Queen. I smiled, but this time it reached my eyes. Not for long. The first week escalation. The first week of Vivian's residence was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She didn't make demands. She made suggestions. She didn't criticize. She helped. Each day brought a new incursion, small enough that objecting would make me seem petty, significant enough to slowly erase my presence from my own home. Monday, she reorganized the kitchen cabinets while I was at work. Now everything's grouped logically, she explained, as I stood staring at shelves I no longer recognized. Baking with baking, serving with serving. Tuesday, she replaced the living room throw pillows. These have much better support for Howard's back, she said. The old ones, pillows I'd hand-selected for their sustainable filling and artisan woven covers, nowhere to be seen. Wednesday, she scheduled a small dinner party with Howard's colleagues. Just a few people from the office, she explained, to help Howard make a good impression on the new VP. The guest list, I noticed, included 3 single women near Howard's age. Thursday, she had the gardener remove the native plant garden I'd spent 3 years cultivating. The previous arrangement was a bit wild, she said. This is much more appropriate for a home of this caliber. My carefully selected drought-resistant California natives had been replaced with water-hungry roses and pristine boxwood hedges. Friday, she replaced our coffee maker with a complicated European model that required an engineering degree to operate. The coffee you've been serving Howard is much too acidic, she explained. This will be gentler on his stomach. By Saturday, I had started documenting everything. Photos of each change, notes on each conversation, records of each expenditure. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this evidence, but collecting it gave me a sense of control when everything else was spinning away from me. Howard, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to my growing distress. Mom's just trying to help, he said, when I mentioned the garden. And you have to admit, the new coffee maker makes a better espresso. I stared at him, wondering how he could not see what was happening. But of course, he didn't. This was normal to him, his mother taking charge, reshaping his environment to her specifications. It had been happening his entire life. 2 weeks later, pantry. 2 weeks into Vivian's reign, I found myself hiding in my own pantry, clutching my phone like a lifeline. She reorganized my spice rack, alphabetically. I whispered to Amy. Who organizes spices alphabetically? Cumin should be next to taco seasoning, not coriander. That's what broke you? The spice rack? Amy's laugh crackled through the speaker. No. What broke me was finding her throwing out my grandmother's recipe box because it was cluttering up the counter. I had to dig it out of the trash. It wasn't just a box. It was the last tangible connection to my mother, to the woman who had taught me that cooking was about love, not perfection. Each stained, handwritten card represented a family dinner, a holiday gathering, a moment of shared joy. And Vivian had tossed it away like junk mail. The kitchen door swung open. I held my breath. Ellen? Vivian's voice rang out. Are you in here talking to yourself again? I emerged from the pantry, phone behind my back. Just checking our grocery needs. Oh, good. While you're here, she pulled out a thick binder. I've created a new cleaning schedule. I noticed the baseboards haven't been dusted in quite some time. I stared at the color-coded tabs and laminated pages. It looked like a military operation plan. Each task was assigned a specific day and time, with checkboxes for completion and detailed instructions for proper execution. My name appeared beside most of the household chores. I work full-time, Vivian. I'm the executive editor of a national magazine. Well, yes, dear, but surely you can manage basic housekeeping. When Howard was growing up, I maintained a spotless home while hosting charity events twice a month. What she didn't mention was the full-time housekeeper, the weekly cleaning service, and the personal chef who had made those achievements possible. In Vivian's revisionist history, she had done it all herself through sheer will and superior organizational skills. The front door opened and Howard's voice called out, I'm home. Vivian's face lit up. There's my boy. She rushed to greet him, leaving the binder on the counter like a ticking bomb. I followed slowly, watching their reunion, the same one they performed every evening as if they hadn't seen each other in years instead of hours. Mom, something smells amazing, Howard said, kissing her cheek. Just a little Coke au vin. I noticed Ellen's attempts at French cooking were a bit elementary. I bit my tongue. My elementary French cooking had been learned at a weekend culinary workshop in Provence, a surprise gift from Howard for our 5th anniversary. But what was the point in mentioning that? In Vivian's world, anything I did was, by definition, inferior. I cleared my throat. Actually, Howard, can we talk privately? He followed me to our new bedroom, the guest room that still felt temporary, like a hotel suite we couldn't check out of. What's up? He asked, loosening his tie. Your mother threw out my grandmother's recipes today. I'm sure she didn't mean to. She's reorganized every cabinet, replaced our bedding, and now she's created a cleaning schedule that would challenge a professional maid service. Howard sat on the bed with Vivian's chosen sheets. She's just trying to help, Elle. She's going through a tough time with the divorce. I wanted to scream. Yes, divorce was difficult. Yes, she was adjusting to a new reality. But why did her coping mechanism have to involve dismantling our life? And what about what I'm going through? This is our home, Howard. Ours, not hers. Howard. Vivian's voice floated up the stairs. Dinner's ready. I've set the table with my Wedgwood china, the ones you grew up with, remember? Howard stood, straightening his tie again. Let's just get through dinner. We can talk more later. But we didn't talk more later. We never did. At dinner, I pushed perfectly cooked chicken around my plate while Vivian regaled us with stories of Howard's childhood. Remember that summer in Nantucket when you won the junior sailing competition? Howard nodded, mouthful of wine braised vegetables. He was always such a natural leader, she told me as if I hadn't known Howard for 10 years. I knew he'd be successful. Mother's intuition. I kept silent, thinking about how little intuition she'd shown about her son's actual happiness. How she'd never noticed or acknowledged his stress-induced migraines, his insomnia before big client presentations, his quiet longing for a simpler life than the one his success had brought him. Flashback Howard's childhood. Years later, Howard would tell me the truth about that sailing competition. How his father had insisted he compete despite his seasickness. How he'd vomited before and after winning. How the trophy his mother displayed so proudly represented one of the most miserable days of his childhood. Dad believed competition built character, Howard explained. Mom believed winning proved our worth. Between them, failure wasn't an option. I thought about my own parents, who'd celebrated my B plus in calculus because they knew I tried my hardest. Who'd framed my first published article, a 300-word piece in a local newspaper, as proudly as if it had been a Pulitzer. I never felt good enough, Howard confessed one night, after too much wine and a particularly difficult call with his mother. No matter what I achieved, there was always the next mountain to climb, the next expectation to meet. Is that why you chose tech instead of finance? I asked. His father's investment firm had been sold after his death, but Howard could have easily followed that path. Partly. I also genuinely love what I do. But yes, choosing a different industry was my small rebellion. He smiled wryly. Not that it stopped Mom from having opinions about my career choices. Our childhoods shape us in ways we don't always recognize until we see them reflected in someone else. Howard's had taught him that love was conditional, based on achievement and compliance. No wonder he struggled to stand up to his mother. Disappointing her meant risking her withdrawal of affection, something he'd been trained since childhood to fear. Present-day mail. My phone buzzed under the table. Amy, found something interesting in your mail pile. Old letter from his sister. I excused myself, ignoring Vivian's comment about phones at the dinner table, and retrieved the letter from Amy's house. In the bathroom, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Sarah's handwriting was elegant and precise, nothing like Howard's hurried scrawl. Dear Ellen, I know we haven't spoken much since Howard and I had our falling out, but I need to warn you about my mother. She did the same thing to me and Jake when we bought our first house, moved in after her temporary setback, took over everything. By the time we realized what was happening, our marriage was in shambles. Don't let her do to you what she did to us. Love, Sarah. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, hearing Vivian's laughter drift up from the dining room. I'd always wondered why Howard rarely spoke of his sister, why their relationship had cooled. Now I understood. Sarah, 3 years Howard's senior and always the more outspoken of the two, had drawn boundaries that Howard couldn't, had paid the price for her independence in family estrangement. How long before this same choice confronted me? Back at the table, Vivian was serving her Sir Brel. I'll teach you how to make it properly someday, Ellen. It's really not as difficult as you might think. I smiled, tucking Sarah's letter into my pocket. That would be lovely, Vivian. But my mind was already racing. If Vivian had done this before, there had to be a way to stop her, and my sister-in-law might just be the key to figuring out how. Under the table, I typed a quick message to a number I'd only used for holiday pleasantries. Sarah, it's Ellen. You were right about everything. Can we talk? The response came almost immediately. I've been waiting for this call. When and where? For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt hope stirring. Vivian might be playing chess, but she didn't know I had just found my queen. Coffee shop a meeting Sarah. The coffee shop was 15 miles from my house, far enough that Vivian wouldn't accidentally drop in for a surprise visit. I spotted Sarah immediately, her blonde hair and Morgan family eyes impossible to miss. We'd met only a handful of times over the years. Holidays when she wasn't traveling for work, Howard's birthday when she could make it. The estrangement between them had always seemed strange given how similar they were. You look exactly the same, she said, pulling back to study my face. You look tired, I replied, noting the shadows under her eyes. That's what divorce does to you. She gestured to a corner table. But we're not here to talk about my failed marriage. Over lads, I detailed the past 2 weeks, the bedroom takeover, the kitchen reorganization, the cleaning schedules. Sarah nodded along, occasionally wincing. God, it's like watching a replay, she said. Did she do the thing where she accidentally shrinks your favorite clothes in the wash? Last week, my cashmere sweater. And the passive-aggressive comments about your cooking? Yesterday, she told Howard she was worried about his cholesterol because of my heavy-handed approach to butter. Sarah snorted. That's rich coming from the woman who used to put cream in everything. She leaned forward. What about the single female colleagues? Has she started inviting them over yet? I nearly choked on my coffee. She did that last night. Some new programmer named Rachel. Because nothing motivates a daughter-in-law like a little competition. Classic Vivian, Sarah sighed. When Jake and I were having trouble conceiving, she invited his ex-girlfriend to our anniversary dinner. Said she ran into her at Whole Foods and just thought it would be nice to catch up. Sarah reached across the table, gripping my hand. Listen carefully, Ellen. This isn't about helping a divorced woman get back on her feet. It's about control. She did the exact same thing to Jake and me. Started with the master bedroom, then reorganized our lives until we forgot what normal felt like. How long did she stay with you? 18 months. Sarah's knuckles went white around her cup. By the end, Jake and I were sleeping in separate rooms. He couldn't understand why I couldn't just get along with his mother. Sound familiar? Howard says the same thing. Like I'm the one being unreasonable. My phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. Noticed you left without breakfast. I'm making Howard's favorite quiche for dinner. Should I expect you? She tracks my meals now, I said, showing Sarah the text. Of course, she does. Next, she'll start commenting on your weight. I grimaced. That had already started. Little remarks about how forgiving certain clothing styles were, suggestions about fitness classes she'd read about, offers to share her foolproof diet plan. Flashback to Sarah's childhood. I was always the disappointing child, Sarah told me, staring into her coffee. Too outspoken. Too independent. When I chose law school over the debutante path Mom had planned, she acted like I'd committed treason. I thought about Howard, always trying to balance his own ambitions with his mother's expectations. How he'd chosen tech consulting instead of taking over his father's investment firm. How he'd moved to California instead of staying in Boston's elite circles. She had my life planned out since birth, Sarah continued. The right schools, the right friends, the right husband from the right family. Every deviation was a personal betrayal. How did you break free? I didn't. Not really. I just replaced her approval with my father's. He respected ambition, even if it wasn't in the direction Mom wanted. He paid for law school, encouraged my career. She smiled sadly. After he died, there was nothing tethering me to her version of reality anymore. She's punishing us, Sarah said after a moment. For growing up, for making our own choices. In her mind, we're still extensions of her. I wondered what it must be like to see your children that way, not as independent beings with their own dreams and desires, but as appendages, reflections of yourself. It explains so much about Vivian's behavior, her need to control every aspect of our lives, her inability to respect boundaries. How did Howard escape her orbit? Sarah asked. He met me, I said simply. In New York at a tech conference. I was covering it for the magazine. He was representing his company. We were from different worlds, but somehow, it worked. And Mom hated you on sight, Sarah guessed. Pretty much. I was everything she didn't want for her son, career-focused, Midwestern, no family connections or trust fund. You were his rebellion. I'd never thought of it that way, but it made sense. Howard's choice of me had been, in its way, a declaration of independence. No wonder Vivian was determined to reassert control. Present day coffee shop. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. But here's what mother doesn't know. I kept everything. Every sarcastic text, every bank statement showing how much she spent improving our house, every legal document from when we finally got her out. How did you do it? We were lucky. The house was in my name because Jake's credit was bad after his startup failed. She paused. Whose name is on your house? Mine. For tax purposes when we moved from New York. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. Then you have options. I'm sending you my lawyer's number. Diane Coleman. She's dealt with cases like this before. But Howard will be upset. Yeah. Jake didn't speak to me for weeks. But ask yourself this. Would you rather have a few weeks of tension or years of watching your marriage dissolve under my mother's reign? My phone buzzed again. Vivian. Also noticed some mold in the guest bathroom. I've scheduled a remodel. Don't worry about the cost. Consider it my gift. She's remodeling my bathroom without asking. I said flatly. Of course, she is. Sarah pulled out a notebook. Start documenting everything. Every unauthorized change, every manipulation, every dime she spends. Diane will need it all. I feel like I'm plotting a coup. You are. But it's your house. Ellen, your life. She squeezed my hand again. And unlike me, you caught it early. You still have a chance to save your marriage. Another text from Vivian. The contractors need access at 8 a.m. tomorrow. I used your credit card for the deposit. Hope that's okay. I showed Sarah the message, my hands shaking with anger. And there's your smoking gun, she said, already dialing a number. Diane? It's Sarah Peters. Remember my sister-in-law I mentioned? She's ready to talk. As Sarah arranged the meeting, I stared at my phone at the stream of text from Vivian detailing all the ways she was helping improve my life. Each message felt like another brick in the wall between Howard and me. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Sarah announced, ending the call. Diane will show you exactly what you need to do. What if it doesn't work? It will. Because this time, you have something I didn't. What's that? Me. Sarah's smile was fierce. And I've been waiting 5 years to see Vivian Steele finally face consequences. My phone buzzed one final time. Howard this time. Mom says you're out. Everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. I looked at Sarah, at the strength in her eyes, and typed back. Everything's about to be. Ready to dethrone a queen? Sarah asked, standing. I gathered my things, feeling stronger than I had in weeks, more than ready. It's time to take back my castle. Flashback at my career. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 20 years, I'd built a career on helping people find authentic ways to live. I'd written articles about setting boundaries, about creating homes that reflected one's true self. I'd interviewed psychologists about family dynamics and relationship experts about healthy partnerships. My first job out of Northwestern had been as an editorial assistant at a small lifestyle magazine in Chicago. I'd worked my way up, eventually landing at Authentic Living in New York, where I'd risen from staff writer to senior editor to executive editor. Each step had been earned through hard work, talent, and the unwavering belief that people deserve spaces, physical and emotional, that honored their true selves. Home isn't just about aesthetics. I'd written in my first editorial after being promoted. It's about creating a space that reflects who you are, what you value, and how you want to live. And yet here I was, letting someone else redesign my life, afraid to speak up lest I damage my husband's relationship with his mother. My own mother would have been disappointed. Ellen, she'd always said, your voice matters. Use it. It was time to take my own advice. Present day lawyer's office. Diane Coleman's office smelled like leather and confidence. She studied the stack of documents I'd brought, property deed, bank statements, texts, and photos of Vivian's improvements to my home. Well, she said, leaning back in her chair, this is actually simpler than I expected. Simple? I shifted in my seat. Nothing about this feels simple. Legally speaking, it is. She tapped the property deed. The house is solely in your name. Your mother-in-law has no legal right to be there without your consent, let alone make modifications or charge expenses to your credit card. But she's Howard's mother, and you're Howard's wife living in a house you legally own. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. Let's talk numbers. How much has she spent on unauthorized renovations? I handed her the credit card statement. Her eyebrows shot up. $22,000 on bathroom remodeling? She said the existing fixtures were depressing. And these furniture deliveries? New dining room set? She donated her old one to charity. Diane's pen scratched across the pad. Without your permission? She said it was a surprise that cost $8,000. She shook her head. Mrs. Morgan, this isn't just overstepping, it's financial abuse. The word abuse hit me like a slap. I'd always associated abuse with physical violence, with shouting matches and visible bruises. Not with redecorating and rearranging spices. Not with helping and improving. I didn't want to make waves. That's exactly what she's counting on. She pulled out a folder. Your sister-in-law's case was similar, but you have something she didn't. Clear documentation of financial misconduct. My phone buzzed. Vivian, the contractors found issues with the plumbing, adding another $5K to the renovation. Don't worry, I handled it. I showed Diane the message. She immediately reached for a form. That's it. We're filing today. She started filling out paperwork. First, we'll freeze your credit cards. Then we'll issue a formal eviction notice, giving her 30 days to vacate. 30 days? My stomach churned. I have to live with her for another month? Unfortunately, yes. But we'll include a cease and desist regarding any further modifications or financial transactions. She slid the papers across her desk. Sign here and here. My hand trembled over the signature line. Once I signed, there would be no going back. This would be war, with Howard caught in the middle. What about Howard? Your husband's feelings are valid, but they don't override your legal rights. This is your property, your money, and your life being systematically dismantled. I thought about Howard, about his conflict between mother and wife, about the impossible position he was in, about the man I'd fallen in love with, thoughtful, kind, supportive in his quiet way, and how Vivian's presence had reduced him to a shadow of himself. I signed. Diane nodded approvingly. I'll have these filed within the hour. Expect the official notice by tomorrow morning. She'll fight this. Let her try. She handed me her card. Document everything from here on out. Every conversation, every action, every dime spent. If she escalates, we'll be ready. I left her office feeling both lighter and heavier. The decision had been made. Action had been taken. But the hardest part, telling Howard, was still ahead. Confrontation date the return. Back in my car, I called Sarah. It's done, I said. I filed the papers. How do you feel? Terrified. Relieved. Guilty. I gripped the steering wheel. How did Howard take it when you and Jake? He didn't speak to me for 3 months. Called me heartless, cruel, ungrateful. She paused. But you know what? Years later, after their divorce, Jake told me he wished he'd listened to me sooner. My phone dinged with another text. Howard this time. Mom says you missed the contractor meeting. Everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. I can't keep lying to him, I told Sarah. Then don't. Tell him tonight before the papers arrive. Give him a chance to process it privately. I started the car, resolve strengthening. Will you stay on standby? I'll keep my phone on all night. You've got this, Alan. Driving home, I rehearsed what I'd say, but all my carefully planned speeches evaporated when I walked in to find Vivian directing workers to tear out my grandmother's antique vanity, the one piece I'd brought from Cleveland, the one my father had restored for my mother as a wedding gift. Oh, good. You're home. She chirped. I hope you don't mind, but since we're already renovating, I thought we should do the master bath too. Howard's ensuite should match mine, don't you think? I stared at the workers dismantling my bathroom, at the credit card receipt sitting proudly on the counter, at this woman who'd taken over my life piece by piece. Actually, Vivian, I said, my voice steady, I do mind. I mind very much. She blinked, that practiced confusion crossing her face. But darling, stop the work, I told the contractors. Now, Ellen. Vivian's voice rose. Don't be ridiculous. Howard will be home in 20 minutes. It's time we all had a talk about boundaries. I pulled out my phone and texted Howard. Come straight home. We need to talk. All of us. His reply was immediate. On my way. Everything okay? I watched Vivian directing the confused contractors to continue working, already planning how to spin this to Howard. No. I typed back. But it will be. Flashback our wedding day. Howard and I had married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Sonoma. Vivian had fought us every step of the way, pushing for Boston, for a larger guest list, for a more suitable venue. In the end, we'd compromised on the guest list but held firm on the location. It's not what I would have chosen, she'd said during the reception, champagne flute in hand. But I suppose it has a certain rustic charm. I'd ignored the dig, too happy to care. Howard had looked so handsome in his suit, his eyes never leaving mine during the ceremony. We'd written our own vows, promising to support each other's dreams, to be partners in all things. I choose you, he'd said, today and every day. I wondered if he remembered those words. If he remembered what it meant to choose someone. Present day, the confrontation. Howard's footsteps on the porch felt like thunderclaps. I stood in our demolished bathroom, contractors frozen mid-demolition, Vivian's face a mask of practiced concern. What's going on? Howard asked, taking in the scene. Your wife is having some sort of episode, Vivian said, reaching for his arm. She's trying to stop the improvements I'm making for us. Improvements? I pulled out my phone. Let's talk about improvements. Vivian, $12,000 for the guest bath, $8,000 for dining room furniture, and now. Now this? I gestured at the destruction around us. Another $15,000 you charged to my credit card without asking? Howard's face paled. Mom? Darling, I was only trying to help. This house needed updating, and Ellen clearly doesn't have the experience to. To what? I interrupted. To decorate my own home? To manage my own money? Our home? Howard said quietly. Our money. Actually, I took a deep breath. Legally, it's not. The house is in my name. The credit cards she's been using are in my name. Vivian's smile tightened. Howard, sweetie, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Ellen's clearly done, I finished. Gentlemen, I addressed the contractors. Please pack up your tools. This renovation is canceled. You can't do that. Vivian stepped forward. Howard, tell her she can't do that. But Howard was staring at the credit card statements I'd laid out on the counter. $35,000, Mom? What were you thinking? I was thinking about your future. This house was barely livable when I arrived. We loved this house, I said. Every imperfect, lived an inch of it, until you arrived and decided to remake it in your image. Howard, Vivian's voice wavered. Surely you can see I was only trying to help. To give you the kind of home you deserve. By destroying my grandmother's vanity? I pointed to the antique piece, now in pieces. By throwing out my family recipes? By taking our bedroom and pushing us into the guest room? I deserve nothing. I cut in. You deserve nothing. This isn't your house. These aren't your decisions to make. Howard picked up a receipt. Mom, did you really donate our dining room set without asking? It was outdated. It was our first major purchase together, he said. We saved for months. I replaced it with something better. With my money, I added. Without my permission. The contractors shuffled awkwardly. Ma'am, should we continue or pack up? The renovation is canceled, I repeated. Howard. Vivian protested. But Howard was still reading receipts. Interior designer consultation? New landscaping contract? Mom, this is insane. What's insane? Vivian drew herself up. Is how ungrateful you both are after everything I've done. Everything you've done. I laughed. You mean like inviting Rachel from Howard's office to dinner trying to make me feel inadequate? Remaking our home without our consent. Howard's head snapped up. You invited Rachel? She's a lovely girl. She's my colleague, Mom, and I'm married to someone who clearly doesn't appreciate. Stop. Howard's voice was firm. Just stop. Silence fell. Even the contractors stopped gathering their tools. Gentlemen, Howard addressed them. Thank you for your time, but we won't be needing your services. They couldn't leave fast enough. Howard, Vivian tried again. Let's discuss this rationally. Rationally? I pulled out one final paper. Okay, let's be rational. This is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to leave our home. The color drained from Vivian's face. You wouldn't dare. I already have. The papers will arrive officially tomorrow. Howard, she turned to him. Are you going to let her do this to your mother? Howard looked from the credit card statements to the demolished bathroom to his mother's face. What choice have you left us? But, but I'm your mother. And I'm his wife, I said quietly. And this is my house. 30 days, Vivian. She drew herself up, tears gathering. You'll regret this. Both of you. As she stormed upstairs, her heels clicking like angry exclamation points, Howard sank onto the edge of the bathtub. I had no idea, he whispered, about any of it. I sat beside him amid the debris of our bathroom. I know. What do we do now? From upstairs came the sound of doors slamming, drawers banging. Now, I said, taking his hand, we take back our home. One room at a time. He squeezed my fingers. Starting with our bedroom. I smiled, hearing Vivian's muffled ranting through the ceiling. Starting with our bedroom. The transition period, the first week after serving the eviction notice, was like living in a war zone. Vivian alternated between icy silence and tearful accusations, while Howard struggled to maintain his composure through it all. She's your mother, I said one morning, watching him stare into his coffee. You're allowed to feel conflicted. She charged $35,000 to your credit cards. L. He rubbed his face. Who does that? A door slammed upstairs, followed by theatrical sobbing. Someone who's never faced consequences, I answered. The doorbell rang. Howard tensed. We'd both grown to dread unexpected visitors since Vivian had started inviting random neighbors over to witness her mistreatment. But it was Amy, bearing breakfast burritos and moral support. Thought you might need reinforcements, she said, setting down the food. I saw Vivian at Starbucks this morning telling everyone who'd listen about her cruel daughter-in-law. Wonderful, I muttered. What's the damage? She tried to convince the barista you're holding her hostage. Amy unwrapped a burrito. But most people seem more interested in their lads than her drama. Howard's phone buzzed. His face fell as he read the message. Mom's sister wants to talk to me, he said. Says I need to see reason before it's too late. Too late for what? I asked. According to this, too late to save my soul from my gold-digging wife. Amy choked on her burrito. Gold digging? You make more than Ellen does. Facts don't matter anymore, I said. We're off script, and Vivian's rewriting the narrative. More footsteps overhead. Then Vivian appeared in the doorway, perfectly made up despite the early hour. Oh, she said, voice dripping with disdain, company. Would you like a burrito? Amy offered, ever polite. I don't eat processed food. Vivian turned to Howard. Darling, did you get Carol's message? Your aunt is very concerned. Mom, Howard's voice was tired. Please don't involve the whole family in this. But they're already involved. Everyone's talking about how your wife is throwing me out on the street. You have 3 houses, I pointed out. That's not the point. Vivian's voice rose. The point is respect. Family values. You clearly know nothing about values, Howard said quietly, like asking before spending thousands of dollars on unwanted renovations. I was improving your life. No, Howard stood up suddenly. You were controlling it, like you always have. Vivian stepped back, shocked. I don't think anyone, least of all Howard, had expected him to be so direct. Howard, I'm your mother. I love you. I know, Mom. I love you too. But Ellen's right. This has to stop. After everything I've sacrificed for you. Sacrificed? Howard laughed, a harsh sound. You're living in our house, spending our money, trying to drive a wedge between me and my wife. That's not sacrifice. That's sabotage. Amy quietly gathered her things. I should go. No, stay. Vivian sneered. Watch how this ungrateful boy treats his mother. The woman who gave him life. The woman who's trying to ruin mine. Howard shot back. The room fell silent. Even Vivian seemed stunned by his outburst. You don't mean that, she whispered. Don't I? You moved in without asking, took over our bedroom, spent money we'd saved for a family on renovations we didn't want. Starting a family? Vivian latched onto the words. You're trying to have a baby? I felt the blood drain from my face. We hadn't told anyone about the fertility treatments we'd been saving for. The money you spent, Howard continued, voice shaking, was for IVF. Amy gasped softly. Vivian's perfect makeup couldn't hide her pallor. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't your business, Howard exploded. Not everything in my life needs your approval or input. I'm your mother. And I'm a grown man with a wife I love and a life you're trying to micromanage. Vivian's lips trembled. I see. Well, if that's how you feel. She straightened her shoulders. I'll be staying with Carol until this unfortunate situation is resolved. She swept upstairs, leaving behind the heavy weight of unspoken words. Howard slumped back into his chair. I'm sorry, he said to me. About the IVF money. We'll save up again. I took his hand across the table. We'll figure it out. Amy stood quietly. I'll let myself out. Call if you need anything. After she left, Howard and I sat in silence, listening to Vivian pack overhead. She'll be back, I said finally. I know, he squeezed my hand, but this time, we're ready. A suitcase thumped down the stairs, followed by Vivian's deliberate footsteps. 23 days left, I whispered. Howard nodded, and we held on to each other as the front door slammed, marking the beginning of the next battle in our war for independence. The final showdown, the final confrontation came 3 days before the eviction deadline. I was sorting through the wreckage of our master bathroom when the front door burst open. Where is she? Vivian's voice rang through the house. Ellen. I found her in our living room, clutching papers and vibrating with rage. Howard's Aunt Carol hovered behind her like a disapproving shadow. How dare you? Vivian thrust the papers at me. A restraining order? You left me no choice. I stood my ground. You've been harassing our friends, spreading lies at Howard's office. I was telling the truth about how you manipulated my son. Stole my rightful place. Your rightful place? I laughed. In my house, using my money? Our house, she corrected. Everything Howard has is because of me. Actually, Diane Coleman's voice cut through the tension as she appeared in the doorway. Everything in this house belongs to Ellen. Vivian spun around. Who are you? Diane Coleman. Mrs. Morgan's attorney. She stepped inside, briefcase in hand. And you're in violation of the eviction notice by entering this property without permission. This is a family matter, Carol interjected. We don't need lawyers. You made it legal when you started harassing my client's colleagues and attempting to access her bank accounts. Vivian's face flushed. I did no such thing. Diane pulled out a folder. We have documentation of 3 attempts to change Mrs. Morgan's banking passwords, all from your IP address, not to mention the defamatory emails sent to her employer. I was warning them about her character. You were trying to get me fired, I corrected, just like you did to Sarah. The mention of my sister-in-law made Vivian's nostrils flare. That ungrateful little. I'm right here. Sarah stepped in behind Diane. Hello, Mother. Miss me? You. Vivian stepped back. What are you doing here? Supporting my sister-in-law. Someone had to warn her about your playbook. My playbook? Move in, take over, isolate, control. Sarah ticked off points on her fingers. Sound familiar? I was helping. You were destroying her marriage, just like you destroyed mine. Carol moved to Vivian's side. Now see here. No, you see here, I interrupted. I have documentation of every unauthorized charge, every lie, every manipulation. Leave now, or I press charges for harassment and financial fraud. You wouldn't dare. Vivian's voice shook. Howard would never allow it. I wouldn't allow what? Howard appeared in the doorway, looking between us all. Your wife is threatening me with arrest, Vivian cried. Because you won't stop, Mom. He moved to stand beside me. Even now, you're breaking the eviction order. Howard, darling, you can't mean. I do mean it. His voice was firm. You have two choices. Leave now and respect the restraining order or face legal consequences. But I'm your mother. And I'm your son, Howard said quietly. Not your possession. I choose my wife, my marriage, my life without your interference. Vivian's face crumpled. After everything I've done for you. To us, I corrected. Everything you've done to us. Diane stepped forward. Mrs. Steele, please don't make this more difficult. Leave now, or I'll have to call the authorities. This isn't over, she hissed, but her voice wavered. Actually, Sarah said, it is. Just like it was over when you tried this with me and Jake. Carol tugged at Vivian's arm. Come on, Viv, we're leaving. My things will be delivered to Carol's house, Diane said, as specified in the eviction notice. Vivian straightened her spine, trying for dignity. You'll regret this. All of you. No, Howard said quietly. The only regret is that it took us this long to stop you. We watched them leave, Carol practically dragging Vivian to her car. As they drove away, Howard let out a long breath. You okay? I squeezed his hand. Getting there. He looked at Diane. Thank you. All of you. Diane nodded, packing up her briefcase. The restraining order is effective immediately. If she violates it, call the police immediately. She will, Sarah predicted. Diane handed me her card. Call me if you need anything else. After Diane left, Sarah hugged us both. Welcome to the other side, she said. It gets easier. Looking around our living room, our space finally truly ours again, I felt lighter than I had in months. Howard and I had survived our first major crisis as a couple. More than survived, we'd grown stronger, clearer about our priorities and boundaries. So, Howard said, managing a small smile, want to start house hunting for a place without my mother's decorating touches? I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. Actually, I was thinking we could use that master bathroom renovation money for its original purpose instead. He pulled me close. IVF? IVF. Sarah grinned. Now that's what I call a happy ending. No, I corrected, watching the last of Vivian's car disappear down our street. That's what I call a new beginning. Epilogue New Beginnings. 1 month later, I stood in our new home, arranging fresh flowers in my grandmother's restored vanity, the only piece of furniture we'd salvaged from Vivian's renovation rampage. Behind me, our bedroom looked exactly as Howard and I wanted it, a perfect blend of both our tastes. Amy appeared in the doorway, holding a bottle of champagne. Ready for girls' night? Almost. Just waiting for, I'm here. Sarah called from downstairs. Sorry, traffic was awful. The last month had brought an unexpected gift, a renewed relationship between Howard and his sister. Years of estrangement, carefully maintained by Vivian's machinations, had begun to heal as they rediscovered their natural alliance. We settled in the living room, our living room, with our furniture back in place. The dining set we'd saved for had been recovered from the charity shop and restored to its rightful spot. As Amy popped the champagne, I touched the envelope in my pocket. Howard and I have news, I said, as he joined us from the kitchen. I pulled out the envelope. Remember our appointment last week? The IVF Clinic's logo was clearly visible. Howard's eyes widened. Ellen? Open it, I urged. His hands trembled as he tore the envelope. Positive, he whispered. It's positive. I nodded, tears spilling. We're pregnant. The room erupted in cheers as Howard swept me into his arms. Wait, Howard pulled back. Should you be drinking champagne? Sparkling cider for me, I laughed, showing him my glass. I've got it covered. We're having a baby, he said, wonder in his voice. We're actually. The doorbell rang. We all froze. Howard checked his phone, then relaxed. It's just mom's last box of things. The movers are right on schedule. I squeezed his hand, knowing how hard these past weeks had been. Want me to handle it? No, he straightened. I've got this. We watched through the window as he signed for the box. The movers were professional, efficient. Have you heard from her? Amy asked softly. She sent a card, Howard said, returning with the box, through her lawyer congratulating us on winning. Still doesn't get it, does she? Sarah shook her head. It was never about winning. No, I agreed. It was about boundaries, respect, building our own life. Howard set the box aside and opened. Speaking of building, he pulled out his phone, showing us a photo. I found us a house. I leaned in. It's perfect. 4 bedrooms. He scrolled through pictures, plenty of room for the baby. And look, it has a mother-in-law suite. We all stared at him. Above the garage, he added quickly, with its own entrance and very clear rental terms. Laughter burst out, releasing the last bit of tension. To new beginnings, Amy raised her glass. And firm boundaries, Sarah added. And family, Howard pulled me close. The kind we choose to build. I touched my still flat stomach, thinking of the life growing there, a life that would know love without conditions, support without control. The movers are booked for next month. Howard continued. Fresh start, fresh place. No alphabetized spice rack, I teased. Unless you want one. I don't. I glanced at Vivian's box sitting in the corner. And I don't want that either. Together, we carried it to the garage. Whatever memories or manipulations it contained could stay sealed, gathering dust. Back inside, Amy was already planning the housewarming party, while Sarah scrolled through paint samples on her phone. Light gray for the nursery, she suggested. Actually, I curled into Howard's side. I was thinking yellow. Bright, warm, welcoming yellow. Like sunrise, he agreed. Like new beginnings. The setting sun streamed through our windows without Vivian's heavy drapes, painting everything in gold. Outside, a sold sign swayed in our front yard, promising new adventures ahead. We were ready for the baby, for the move, for whatever came next because this time we were facing it together, on our terms, in our way. And somewhere in an unopened box in our garage, Vivian's version of our story gathered dust, unread and unnecessary. We had our own story to tell now.